and we appreciate your service, sir. We want to welcome the community as well, whether you're watching us live or on tape afterwards, quote unquote, tape delay. Um, the fact that you're watching, listening, means that you care. And so we appreciate all of your concern for safety and wellness for our community. We hope that your household, your street, your community, your neighborhood, and all the adjoining neighborhoods are operating in safety and wellness today. We know that's not always the case in our community, and that's why we're here. We have spent a lot of time listening to you. We are still in the process of hearing your voices. We want you to know that we're going to come back to you before this is all said and done and do some member checking and say, here's what we think we heard. Tell us what we got right. Tell us what we got wrong. So do know that if it's been a long time, and for many of it's been a while since you've given us input, we will be coming back to you. And Dr. Campbell, when you get a chance, if you could put the email for the task force in the chat so that we can kind of let people know how they can get in contact with us if they have any concerns, questions. We still don't know all the great things that are happening in our city that are lifting up safety and wellness. We've been doing our best, but we're still finding out new things each and every week. So just want to again welcome not just your presence, but your action as well. If you want to be part of this fight to move us into a more safe, a more whole community, we invite you to join us. And so I'll pass it over. I'm Xavier. I am one of the co-chairs, and I'll pass it over to Marsha, our other co-chair.
Hey, thanks. It's so good to see you all. I just wanted to offer the value tonight of gratitude as we reflect and make a decision about, 6 more months. I just want to give gratitude. It is such, y'all inspire me to be able to be a part of this progressive movement, a part of this task force, and to work alongside each and every one of you, and the mission that we have and the commitment that just keeping up with you guys is just fabulous. So I just want to give a lot of gratitude for you and our mission and for our beloved community. And I will then turn it over. Xavier, who is going to be talking about the extending?
Well, next on our agenda is Dr. Jennifer Carroll with the employee substance use policy.
Oh, okay. I have the wrong agenda.
Well, I hope I'm right.
No, I'm sure you are. I was wondering where that went. So that's great.
Can we drop the agenda in the chat?
Got it. Thanks, darling. Okay, good.
Does someone have the call words? Does someone on the call have the ability to make me a co-host so I can share my screen? I apologize. I was just thinking about that now. Hey, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Me. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to try to make this as concise as possible, just to be respectful of everyone's time. I want to emphasize that this, two things. One is that this has been discussed among all the members of our roundtable and some other folks, but this slide deck is entirely mine. So any errors in it, mischaracterizations in it, I can only claim full ownership of. And second, I want to emphasize that I know many things, but I am not a lawyer. So it is entirely possible that I have misunderstood something, mischaracterized something. I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again, but I did my best. So briefly, thank you very, very much, Dwayne, and to our chairs for giving us a generous chunk of our agenda, and I'll do my best to not abuse that privilege. So we have been discussing the merits of altering recommending rather the alteration of the employee substance use policy for the city of Durham, which employs based on a website I saw, I think 2,400 people, if that sounds about right. And I'm going to move through a little bit of what we know about like evidence around these policies and best practices. I did put this slideshow together to be sent to a number of stakeholders and partners, thinking that it would be easier to engage with and navigate through as opposed to like just a block of text. So it's kind of text heavy, but I'm hoping I'll be able to send this out to folks after this call is over so that you can actually look at it and spend more time with it if you like. So the purpose here is that the Crisis Response 911 Roundtable is concerned that the current policy governing employee substance use, drug screenings, and consequences for policy violation is out of line with the principles under which the Community Safety and Wellness Task Force was convened, and in its current form does not serve the city or its employees well. We seek to amend this policy to reflect current evidence in workplace safety and best practices in supporting employee health. So I'm going to move through some evidence kind of quickly, just for the sake of time. I'm happy to answer questions later, and then I'll get to sort of the crux of what we're thinking and where we are in this process. And if it's not clear, this is to get feedback and hear thoughts that folks have. This is not a formal proposal yet. This is an ongoing conversation. So we know that as many as 1 in 10 employed adults are living with some kind of alcohol use or substance use disorder, with highest rates in construction, healthcare, and the service industry. And there are certain things that put employed people at higher risk of a substance use disorder, and especially an opioid use disorder. And some of those things are very obvious, like occupational injury. But there's other things like low job security and poor sick leave policies that are also associated with higher rates and more severe substance use disorder where it develops. We have a lot of federal laws that use drug-free and drug-free workplace in their title, but we have a good amount of scientific evidence that suggests that strict drug-free workplaces are not necessarily safer workplaces. And for me, this was an important takeaway because one of the sort of central purposes, by my understanding, of having a no tolerance or drug-free workplace policy is a matter of safety. But we know that there's been studies that have found no association between random drug testing and improved safety, or even employee substance use, and this is for stimulants and opioids, outside of work on their own time and job performance. So it's important to ask like what our goals are in setting these policies, and then are those policies actually meeting those goals? We also know that mandatory drug testing does not reliably produce safer workplaces. So strict and no tolerance policies especially have not been shown effective at improving safety in schools or in a variety of other workplaces. Again, studies suggest that neither opioid use nor stimulant use outside of the workplace necessarily impacts job performance. It can, but so can many, many other things going on in our lives. And then most importantly, if we are interested in providing the best support and service that we can to employees that are at risk of or living with a substance use disorder, urine drug testing is an extremely poor method for identifying persons with undiagnosed substance use disorder, largely because single-digit percentages of people who have used an illicit drug in the last year actually are living with a substance use disorder. This one was important to us. So mandatory drug testing in the workplace it is shaped by and produces racial bias in the workplace. Across the population, workplace drug testing is disproportionately imposed on workers who are younger, Black, male, and have no pre-existing substance use. Studies have shown higher proportions of Black employees in the workplace to be associated with more mandatory testing in like upper management, administrative, and financial professions. And studies have also found that population-wide, a higher proportion of Hispanic employees is associated with mandatory testing in tech and IT occupations. And finally, a lot of research on how to improve safety in the workplace has found that coworkers are most effective at keeping each other safe. I think this is the one that's probably going to be the most obvious to folks that are on this task force. But individual actions specifically taken by trained employees to improve workplace safety, like sharing information, refocusing on self-care, and mutual aid with coworkers, are often the most impactful outcomes of training and education in the workplace. I'm going to skip this video because it's a little dorky, but the point is that CDC is focusing on recovery-oriented workplaces quite a lot these days, and so is NIOSH, and this is a new set of policies that they're really promoting, especially around opioid settlement. So best practice recommendations that we have from the literature, and this is all based on my review of the literature. And for the sake of transparency, this is research that I actually did as part of a contract back in November to try to provide guidance to the National Association of Counties on workplace policy, because counties are workplaces now that opioid settlement money is coming down the pike. So we know that policies that are stigmatizing or punitive in nature are not best practices. This includes no tolerance policies, one strike rules, mandatory drug testing, universally applied, and other facets of drug-free workplace cultures and policies that don't recognize substance use disorders as treatable medical problems. There are safety issues that should be dealt with as safety issues, and then there are medical issues to be dealt with as medical issues, and best practice is to clarify those two things and treat them separately. Ensuring parity and equity in workplace policy and implementation, right? So we know that substance use and drug testing policies are often implemented inequitably across the workforce. And that means that it is often implemented inequitably across racial groups, across social class, and often imposes stricter rules and disproportionate impact of those rules on certain populations, especially Black and Brown people, and people that are working in subsections of the city. We know that the implementation of universal supportive policies that acknowledge substance use disorders as a medical problem and provide pathways to recovery are a best practice. And this is a broader conversation about improved access to behavioral health care, increased job security, steps to reduce the risk of cumulative traumatic injury at work. And that is, again, part of like a much broader conversation about healthcare policies and employee assistance policies in the city of Durham, but it's worth mentioning. And then two more. So increasing employees' access to wellness and recovery resources like sick leave, counseling, mental health services, holistic pain care, peer recovery support services, all sorts of things that help prevent substance use disorder, help prevent other distress from transitioning into a substance use disorder, and helps catch substance use disorder early when people are still on their feet and able to get that help. And then finally, providing meaningful education for employees and supervisors on the risk factors, medical treatments, multiple pathways to recovery. That's the kind of training that really enables employees to help each other, and enables coworkers to support one another and create really recovery-friendly, low stigma workplaces where safety can be a priority, but also the wellness of the people working in that environment can be prioritized. So the city of Durham has a substance use policy. It is online. It is effective as of 2019, so it was updated relatively recently. And there's a link to it. You can find it online. It's also very easy to Google if you're interested in it. But there are two laws, by my understanding, and I gained this not just from my own sort of digging, but talking to various people who have been employment lawyers or who have been labor reps in places outside of North Carolina and have kind of been through this discussion before. There's two major pieces of legislation, to the best of my knowledge, are the ones that really govern what obligations the city has in producing a substance use policy for employees. So there's the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988. This affects all organizations receiving federal grants or federal contracts exceeding $100,000. That is us. It requires the establishment of drug-free workplace policies and specific consequences for a policy violation to be determined by each employer. So it must say, this is our drug-free policy, this is what will happen in case that policy is violated. It requires the establishment of employee assistance programs. That's different than healthcare or mental health coverage. I believe right now, a branch of Duke has our EAP contract, but these are folks that assist employees with everything from like, I need to find assistance locating a rehab to my mother died and the estate is here and I don't know what to do and I'm losing my mind. So there's all kinds of support for employees. The law requires good faith reporting of covered policy violations, so specific violations covered under that law. It does not mandate universal drug screening, and it does not mandate punitive consequences for policy violations. It simply says that consequences must be clear and clarified in the policy, whatever they may be. It is conceivable that the consequence could be like go talk to a caseworker for half an hour and make sure everything's cool, right? I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying like that's the scope of what's possible. There's also the federal motor carrier safety regulations. This affects all employees holding and using a commercial driver license and their employees. So that's a lot of Durham City employees. The federal motor carrier safety regulations do mandate drug screening of commercial driver's license holding employees. It's mandated pre-employment. It's mandated post-accident under reasonable suspicion. So if someone essentially a manager or someone who reports to a manager believes that you are impaired on the job due to consumption of a substance, return to duty testing. And then also it mandates random testing at regular intervals. And it's very specific of like, you have the pool of people, a specific percentage of people have to be tested so often. You use a random number generator to figure out who it is. So it's sort of cycling random urine screening or drug screening throughout employment. It also mandates safety-related responses to violations of the policy, but does not explicitly mandate punitive responses. So it does not mandate, say, termination or loss of wages necessarily. So Durham's current policy, as I read it, and based on some of the advice that I have gotten from others, does many things that bring it in compliance with the Drug-Free Workplace Act as it should be, right? So we're following federal law. So the current policy does include a statement clearly prohibiting the manufacture, use, and distribution of controlled substances in the workplace. It clearly spells out the specific consequences for employees of violating this policy, and across the board currently it is termination. Occasionally it is consequences up to and including termination, but most times it's just termination. It clarifies the procedures and expectations for taking direct action against an employee found in violation, as the law requires it to do. It establishes in a separate policy Duke as the employee assistant program provider for the City of Durham employees, which again, the act requires it to do. By my understanding, and this is kind of where we're hoping to recommend some more evidence-based practices. By my understanding, Durham's policy exceeds the scope of what is required of it by the Drug-Free Workplace Act, in that it is a strict no-tolerance policy, which is not in line with best evidence or best practices and is not mandated by the law. It mandates universal pre-employment drug screenings, not only for people who are in safety-sensitive jobs or commercial driver's license holders. It bars those who fail their pre-employment screening from city employment for a period of 6 months. That is not required under the law. It employs a universal reasonable suspicion for drug screenings, which means that within the bounds of the policy as it is set out and the procedure as is set out in the policy, an employee can be essentially sent to drug screening if a supervisor or manager believes that they reasonably believe that that person is impaired. It mandates employee termination as the consequence of policy violation. And importantly, SAMHSA is clear that punitive consequences are not required by the law. It is the employer's right to do so, but these are one of the well-intentioned but ultimately stigma-producing and stigmatizing consequences that NIOSH and the CDC are now recommending against. And the Durham's policy applies to employees both on and off the job. As for that second law, the one federal motor carrier safety regulations, Durham's policy, by my read, does many things that it must do in order to remain in compliance with this federal law. So it establishes, as it should, procedures for pre-employment testing, post-accident testing, reasonable suspicion testing, return to duty testing, and random testing for commercial driver's license holding employees. There might be one or two other sets of required testing, but those are the big ones. It establishes procedures for selecting candidates for that random testing, as well as a timeline for random testing, which the law requires it to do. And it establishes procedures for removing commercial driver's license holders' drivers from driving status if they were found to have taken a drug that causes impairment, right? So there's just simply a procedure for removing someone from the responsibility of operating a vehicle today, aside from all other workplace policies that might emerge as a consequence of substance use or impairment on the job. by my read and by the advice that I have gained from others, it is also my understanding that Durham's current policy exceeds the scope that is mandated of it by the federal motor transportation and safety regulations. So it applies pre-employment testing and reasonable suspicion testing to all employees, not simply commercial driver license holders. It performs random testing for alcohol among commercial driver license holders at a rate 150% higher than that required by law. It applies random drug testing for controlled substances to employees in health and safety, and it says to volunteers. I'm curious about what that looks like in practice and who constitutes a volunteer in this setting, or how that is. I do not know how that is implemented, but that is what is in the policy. And it mandates employee termination as a consequence of most policy violations. Again, there's instances in which it says up to and including termination, but most often it is terminated, and punitive consequences are not necessarily required by the law. So there's a few additional concerns that came to my attention and came to the attention of some others that I've spoken to with the current content of Durham's policy. One, it mandates the completion of a rehabilitation program if you're returning to work after a positive drug screen, even though, as has been said here, a positive drug screen is a very poor predictor of substance use disorder. I understand the need and desire to have assurances that a person you bring into the workplace is going to be safe in the workplace. That doesn't change the fact that treatment and rehabilitation rehabilitation is a high acuity treatment, and it is not indicated for people who do not have a substance use disorder. So it is conceivable that if someone fails a drug test for the city and wants to keep their job, that they will have to go through an expensive and time-consuming program that they do not need in order to get their job back, and that just makes no sense. It includes some problematic definitions of reasonable suspicion, something that's much broader than I've seen in a lot of other policies. It includes things like appearance and body odor, which invites both implicit and explicit bias in the implementation of the policy. It places the financial burden for confirmatory testing on employees. Briefly about that, I'll say that interpreting urine drug screens is extremely complicated. I am not a toxicologist, but I work in a field that is sort of toxicology adjacent, and I deal with toxicology data all the time. And I can tell you that, like, it's not just I ate a poppy seed bagel for breakfast. Like, the metabolites that we excrete can be really challenging to interpret. And I've seen medical doctors just struggling to be like, is my patient taking their oxy or not? This is so hard to interpret. So confirmatory testing is not simply, oh, I failed and I want to sort of like appeal the failure of my drug test. It's a very, very necessary component of understanding how to interpret certain drug screens. So again, financial burden for that is placed on employees. It does not account for potential overtime when employees are sent for mandatory testing. Grievance procedures that employees might bring against how the policy is implemented in a way that affects them are outlined only in very, very general terms. And there's heavy use of inappropriate and stigmatizing language all through the document. It would not even pass an AP editor at this point. So this is a sort of how we're thinking through the proposal. So what we would like to see, or what we're thinking of proposing, and we welcome feedback, I welcome feedback, is to eliminate the City of Durham's current employee substance use policy and replacing it with a new one, a policy or policies that support workplace safety and employee health and wellness through supportive, recovery-friendly principles and procedures that reduce stigma, educate employees at all levels of the city administration, prioritize work performance and employee work well-being, and are equitably applied. And I should add, are in compliance with federal laws that dictate what must be in that policy, right? Those things are inflexible. So the priority items that we would like to see in a new policy, and again, this is a glorified whiteboard, we're still at the whiteboard, but replacing stigmatizing and punitive consequences to substance use related concerns, and here we're specifically talking about the no tolerance policy, with evidence-based recovery-friendly responses. So counseling, brief interventions with qualified professionals, peer recovery support services, linkage to evidence-based treatment when desired. I think the success of the HEART program is evidence enough that the city is well within its capacity to implement some of these, or even just connect employees with some of these interventions. And this also might fall under the EAP policy with Duke. A citywide declaration of support for a recovery-friendly workplace would be a very lovely place to start. And there's just an example of a recovery-friendly workplace statement. We would be very happy to see an end to universal drug testing for city employees, so that we have drug testing procedures that are in conformity but not excess of the mandates of federal law. So that means ending pre-employment screening, reasonable suspicion testing, and random testing among employees that don't work in safety critical positions altogether. Even in medical settings, these types of screenings for monitoring and supervision are being replaced with functional things of like, how is your body doing? If you're in pain care, things like that, like what were you functionally able to do today? So it makes perfect sense to say that these employees could be evaluated on their job performance, say, as opposed to what is in their urine, especially if we know those two things aren't connected. And we know that testing, I can't speak to Durham specifically, but population-wide tends to be disproportionately leveraged against Black and Brown persons. We believe that we would like to see a strengthened employee grievance and appeal process. As I mentioned, the grievance process that employees might bring if they feel like this policy has been inappropriately applied to them in a way that disadvantages them is very, very vague. And so it would be good to clarify responsibilities of those and the procedures for grievance in full detail, and to possibly even establish a civil service review board, which many other cities in North Carolina already have. So in principle, a third party that has the standing and the training in order to help mediate some of these conflicts if they arise. We would like to ensure parity and equity in the implementation of substance use related policies and procedures. And I want to say specifically that this is a request and a priority that was repeated to me time and time again as I talked to different Durham City employees across different sectors in thinking through this. So drug testing mandates and safety procedures are often implemented in ways, as we know, that produce racial bias. And this is avoidable by ensuring that all policies, including post-motor vehicle accident testing, are applied equally to employees in safety sensitive positions. And that includes commercial driver's license holders, but emergency medical personnel, law enforcement, first responders. I cannot speak to the city's current contract with law enforcement, first responders, emergency medical personnel. I just have not had the time yet, but this is something that's been brought up again and again and again as a priority. Implementing a second chance hiring and employment protocol for people with past convictions. There's tons of literature about that, but it's very much aligned with the ban the box sort of campaigns. So we're not allowing people's past history with substance use disorder or past involvement with the criminal justice system necessarily disqualify them for employment on its face, but perhaps only consider it where it's actually functionally relevant. And then finally, providing evidence-based training on substance use for all city employees. And so that includes risk factors for substance use disorder, evidence-based treatments, substance use specific services that are available through the EAP, evidence-based identification of impairment, especially for supervisors. Body odor is not a good indicator of mental impairment. And then personally, I would love to see overdose recognition, response, and naloxone training for every city employee. And this would be a great place to do that. We have interfaced with the UE Local 150 and with numerous city employees. We are continuing to interface with labor advocates, public health lawyers, city leadership, task force members here, as well as folks that work in HR and can help us understand a little bit better what sort of services are already available. Yeah, this conversation is ongoing. One thing that I did want to mention, and this is my last slide, and then I'll wrap up. More than one person outside of the state of North Carolina mentioned the policy around drug testing, specifically around the implementation of that federal transportation safety regulations in the UPS contract. UPS being the United Parcel Service, they are in cars a lot, they drive a lot. And this policy was pointed out by a number of people as a really good, thoughtful, strong policy that protects employees and employers. It outlines clear expectations for training and reporting, detailed criteria for establishing reasonable suspicion, clear procedures for grievance, employee obligations. It supports employee autonomy in drug testing and prioritizes wellness and safety over punishment. Yeah, we're hoping to kind of maybe use this as a model if we start putting together different proposed language. So I will stop there. But this is sort of like a super quick, I guess that wasn't super quick, but it's sort of an overview of the things that we've been discussing. As I said, I can send out the slides after this so folks can look through them if you like. But yeah, that's what we're thinking of. I see so many questions. Jesse?
Thank y'all.
Mhm.
This is fascinating. Isn't something that I would have immediately thought of. But just after listening, definitely see the connection to the work that y'all are doing in crisis response. You know, if the folks that are working for the city in crisis response situations are in a workplace environment that isn't supportive, that's something that like aligns with what we're doing. So, but I think that's something that could easily be missed. Just thinking about more of like the people who are being served as opposed to the people doing the work serving. So I just want to commend y'all being thoughtful in that way. One question I had was, is there anyone in the city, be it like city clerk's office or city attorney's office, or like people that do HR for the city? Have you all been able to connect with someone in a staff role that would be like in an ideal position to like see this actually executed across the board? That just feels like it would be a strategic partner in something like this.
Yes. So me personally, I have been trying to balance two competing priorities. One is being respectful of people's time, because just walking into HR and being like, I have ideas, talk to me, is not a good use of their time. But two, knowing that they need to be sort of brought in early and inform that discussion, not only because people like HR have a really long institutional memory, but also, as you said, are in an implementing role as well. So our partners at the Department of Community Safety have been very helpful in facilitating connections with folks in those departments. I could have just cold called them, but this has made it a little bit quicker and a little bit friendlier. That we've made connections with folks this week. So I have a couple of emails that I'm looking forward to responding to. So I'm very excited to pursue those conversations. I have not reached out to a city attorney. I cannot imagine that a city attorney didn't look at the original policy, but like I feel like that's a couple steps down the road before it's worth cashing in their time for our benefit.
No, yeah, that makes sense. I just figured, I mean, I wasn't sure which one, but it just felt like it would be an even stronger proposal if a staff person in one of those departments is somehow connected. So shout out to Ryan and the CSD folks for yet again providing such wonderful service and care.
Indeed.
So that's me. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate it. Mike?
Yeah, Jesse sort of anticipated my question, and Jillian's comment in the chat did as well. First of all, I think this just seems so self-evidently rational and well thought out, but that doesn't mean that elected officials will give it the time due consideration. Their first instinct would probably be, well, what does the city manager think? What does the county manager think? And they might dismiss it, out of hand, and sort of being, as Jesse was saying, kind of beyond our brief of the task force, although I think it's very well in line. And I would suggest when we have an actual proposal, I think it's well worth the task force considering it, approving it, and putting it before the relevant bodies early, not waiting for our final report, because it might get buried in there and it's sort of a distinct topic. And there's no particular funding, it's not like another proposal, because we've already been sort of, slapped. Don't give us, although we've been told by one at least, don't give us proposals that tell us how to manage things. So I guess, one point, and perhaps Jillian could advise on this, is to Jesse's point, who would be the relevant folk to try to engage early to get blessing and say they see the efficacy of this before it gets put before elected officials. And it certainly makes sense to start with the city, but are you anticipating, also, if it's good enough for city employees, what about county employees? What about school board, public school employees, who are also two of the other governing bodies that have instituted us, but one bite at the apple at a time.
Yeah, so I think that was my approach, was the one by the apple time. I would love to hear if Jillian has any thoughts or anyone else, but I'll just say briefly that what my initial plan, and I very eagerly welcome feedback or comment about this if folks have thoughts about something that would be more prudent or productive, is that we have a meeting set up with the UE 150 next week. And so I was thinking of kind of putting a pause on conversations until we get to have that like full interface with a larger group and kind of put those priorities center. And then from there, the only other thing that I personally was feeling needed to be done was to be able to propose some kind of alternative language, even if it gets totally torn apart in discussion. Because in my experience with policy change, it's a very different proposition to show up and be like, hi, we hate this, please change everything, versus showing up and saying, here is an actual proposal on paper so that we can talk about language on the page, not these like higher principles and think about drafting stuff up. And then perhaps taking that proposal language, which we aren't going to be super committed to because it will obviously change to different folks at that point, and where any sort of task force recommendation would fall in that timeline. I welcome feedback on that, but that's sort of what I was thinking, and I very much welcome other ideas and approaches.
Hey, y'all, I can jump in on Mike's question. So my experience so far with having this conversation with Wanda just about cannabis, so not even about, completely eliminating employment drug testing, is that it has not gotten a very good reception. The rationale has been seemingly primarily about risk and risk management, and whether the city would be taking on more risk either in reality or in the perception of our insurers if we didn't have pre-employment drug testing, or if we removed cannabis from the schedule of drugs that we look for. So I've had several conversations with her about it over the course of about the last year. And she, I know, has had some conversations with HR, and I maybe can find this, or you maybe already also have this data, but I had an intern with the I team with Ryan before it was community safety, did some research on other city and county drug testing policies just to kind of see what was out there. So I can look for that and send it along if I can find it. But yeah, I mean, the general vibe has been, this is not something that we're interested in moving very much. And I've kind of not, so it hasn't really been something that I was gonna push on my own. It just hasn't, like, I kind of took it off my priority list for my chats with her.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's an issue. It's important. I think if y'all want to move something on it, it's worth doing, even like it's worth bringing attention to the question, even if we don't ultimately get a successful resolution now. I think it is very much in line with our values to have a conversation about, why do we care if our employees use recreational drugs on their own time and it doesn't affect their work? Like, what risk is there to us? It's their business. I mean, I think there are a lot of good arguments for getting rid of it, in addition to the, public health and safety pieces. I think that people will be excited about less government oversight generally. I mean, I think we don't have any business regulating things that don't need to be regulated. So yeah.
Play the libertarian card.
There's some libertarians out there who are definitely like 50% of the time, I'm like, yes. And the other 50% of the time, not so much, but they'll be with us on this for sure.
Thank you so much, Jillian. That's really helpful. Marcia, do you have a hand up?
Yeah, if it's, first off, thank you. This was really well done, and I really appreciate all the work you put into this. It's wonderful.
I feel like you're not getting me at my sharpest at 6 p.m., but I appreciate that.
You're great. You're great. If this is a risk issue, what about subcontractors? What about all the people that we hire? Did you find anything in?
Not specifically. And if someone else on the call knows more than me, I welcome you to speak up. But my general understanding is that contractors follow their own employees' policies, right? So like if we subcontract out to ABC construction company to build a building, the ABC employees are bound by whatever ABC's policy is, and that has nothing to do with the city.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So like, for example, my understanding is that some of our contracted employees, even in the community safety department, don't necessarily have some of these policies applied to them because they're not officially Durham employees.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I was just going to say what resonated for me is in the conversations that we've had regarding safety and wellness in public schools, it's been clear that taking a strict punitive stigmatizing approach for like responding to young people's behavior is not the most productive way to go about engaging.
Mhm.
And even the tensions around like leaning into more restorative justice practices, like people will say restorative justice, but then still implement suspension, still
Mhm.
implement punitive measures.
Mhm.
And it doesn't actually move us along in creating a culture of care.
Mhm.
And so in my mind, it's the same value system, right? Of like, if we believe in like restorative, transformative justice, if we believe and want to see us create a culture that is beyond policing, that is beyond punishing people or controlling people and getting them to do what we want them to do, but actually being curious enough to like understand, like, is there an issue here? If so, how can we create a way to like serve you so that the issue is no longer an issue? Or if there isn't an issue, like, how do we just create a space that makes you better, makes you good, makes you whole?
Mhm.
And for, again, our employees, our service providers that are in these crisis response situations, we should definitely be doing everything we can to make sure that they are set up for success. And that definitely shouldn't be penalizing people for like responsibly using recreational drugs on their own time, if they're not hurting anyone and it's keeping them, in a like good place, to be able to do their jobs well and live full, good lives in Durham, like more power to them. So just wanted to name for me the connection that I've seen in the work that we've been doing around schools. And for me, it's the same principle of like
Mhm.
the stigma, punitive, the punitive, and stigmatizing approach doesn't track with actually creating cultures of like wellness and care.
Yeah.
And I think that's a much more cogent argument than the libertarian, but like, hey, use what you got, get where you're going.
I appreciate that so much. I want to be sensitive of time, but my roundtable members also asked me to mention briefly, just to put it on folks' radar, that we are planning to have discussions about, and like we literally just put these on our agenda for our next meeting. We haven't discussed them yet, but we're going to be talking about whether or not there is a there in terms of, we believe that about 7 to 8% of all the calls for service with the Durham County Sheriff are animal control related. And we would like to spend some time reflecting on the question of, is the Sheriff's Department the best entity to be fulfilling the role of animal control in Durham County? And then the second one is the possibility of recommending a resolution asking the General Assembly to strengthen the 911 Good Samaritan law. And Dare County commissioners have recently put out such a resolution, and it's in discussion in a lot of other counties. And that's all coming down the pike. So we'll have more to share in the future, but if you have any questions or thoughts about that in the meantime, definitely reach out to folks. It's myself, Isak, Manju, Shanice, and Rose. So.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for that. Well thought out, well presentation. I love when a slide deck has receipts. I mean, you have places to click. Like, you want to go deeper, here you go. I'm sorry, Manju.
Just wondered if I could lift the stuff from the chat for folks who aren't able to see it.
Absolutely.
We heard Councilmember Johnson share subcontracting as a way to reduce risks for the city. The contractor would be liable for any issues, not the city of Durham. And task force member Andrea Muffin Hudson shared New York City bans pre-employment screening for marijuana use, except for safety and security sensitive jobs and jobs bound by a federal or state contractor grant. And we're curious too about county. I didn't hear if you mentioned that, Jennifer, but curious about whether we could learn more about the county policy and make this as a recommendation there as well.
I concur. I just haven't done that yet. If someone wants to beat me to it, I would welcome that. But yeah, I just haven't gotten there yet. Mhm. But I agree.
So we really appreciate you bringing the full task force into your ongoing discussion and giving us a peek into what you're talking about as a roundtable. Going to Mike's comment about, staff being told how to do their job and so forth. There are policies and there are practices, and as you're thinking about how to move this forward down the road, consider that as well. And so some of the things that you're thinking about are actually practices and some of policies, and sometimes the policy itself recommendation can lead to better practices. It's not a given once you put it in the hand that so you may want to suss out what you consider a policy recommendation and what you consider a practice recommendation, and that may land better with the elected bodies and for those who do the work, the policy work in our city, our county, and our Board of Education. So it's just my little 2 cents on that, as how you want to deliver it. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to our next item. One thing that's interesting about the next item, and again, the same task force, I'll turn it over to them in a second because the Crisis Response Roundtable has been talking about this subject for a while. So they put together a recommendation for us, and it's about extending the task force. It's the only vote mentioned inside of our bylaws. The bylaws gave us the freedom to craft our voting procedures, and we decided that we would do everything by simple majority except for recommendations that go out to our elected bodies. And this is the one place that says if we're going to extend the term for task force for up to 6 months, it has to be 2/3. And of course, we have 10 members of the task force here. 2/3 is about 6.6, or let's round it to 7 people, unless somebody feels like a 0.6 person a day. Let's go. So at least 7 people would need to vote in affirmative on this. Does someone from that roundtable have the wording of that to share? If not,
Yeah, I've already got my screen sharing privileges, so I
Awesome.
can pull it up.
I'll turn it back over to you.
I've been talking so much. Someone else on the round table.
And again, we have discussed, we just did discuss this in our last meeting.
Okay.
And I do want to point out that the bylaws consider or talk about, once you get to the end of your 2 years, you might want to consider extending. Well, that's not very practical. So we don't want to wait until then, from a planning standpoint. So we thought it'd be best to at least express and make a vote at this point, which of course wouldn't kick in until the full 2 years are up.
Mhm.
Okay.
Isaac, do you feel like sharing this one aloud?
No, I'm okay. Jennifer's doing a great job.
Jennifer, do you want me to do it so that you don't have to keep using your voice right now?
If you wouldn't mind, I'm just trying to make it see if I can make it appear on both sides of the. Yeah, if you would like to take it away, Manji, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Wonderful. So this would be an extension of our Community Safety and Wellness Task Force till the end of the year, till October rather. The Community Safety and Wellness Task Force is currently scheduled to dissolve on April 28th, 2023, which I believe was 18 months from our first meeting. We recommend that Durham City Council take action to extend the state and continue the work of the task force for a period of no longer than 6 months beyond this original sunset up to October 28th, 2023. We further propose that the research assistant positions recently filled in the Community Safety Department are maintained and supported at least through the dissolution of the Community Safety and Wellness Task Force, as the support and skills that these assistants offer is crucial to task force members' ongoing work. And we see this proposal as addressing needs around fulfilling our purpose acknowledging ways that our pursuits of this goal aren't yet complete. We are not proposing to add new work into our commitments, but rather to fulfill our existing commitments with greater care and at a more sustainable pace. So the two primary pieces are, would we like to allow the work to continue for a period of up to 6 months? And would we like to preserve and maintain the research assistantship positions? Any other notes on this proposal to lift up?
I will mention that I made the error of, first of all, misspelling our task force and then adding Rose here. She has already made it clear that she is recused as a city employee, and that is my error, not hers. Yes.
Any other questions or edits before we take a vote?
Mike has his hand up.
So the question about no direct costs, I suppose, if the RAs, as in those who can continue and wish to continue, does that not count as an associated additional cost? Although the cost of those research assistants wasn't really baked into the initial task force creation anyway.
Mhm.
And then the second, I don't know, question or suggestion is perhaps some language about if we have an extension, there will be no need for all of us to be re-sworn in. I don't know about the rest of you. Maybe it's only been us county appointees, but I get these emails saying you need to come and your term is expired and you need to be sworn in again. And I did it,
Mhm.
and then I get another one. So just so it doesn't kick in that somehow automatic process, and maybe the city doesn't even deal with that. Maybe it's just the county that is having that issue with the county appointees.
That's definitely the case. As far as the cost is concerned, the continuation of research assistance would come from the funds that we already have access to and would not relinquish with an extension. And as far as the different ways that the three elected bodies, their different bylaws for membership, the county members probably will see another document saying, hey, let's sign up one more time. So expect more paperwork. If we can find ways to get around that, we'll explore that as well. Other concerns, questions, comments? We consider that a motion. It's I would like a second for.
I second the motion.
Thank you. All right. Are we ready for the vote? Okay, I'll call your names and you let us know how you're feeling about it. If I can find my paperwork. There it is. Going again by first name, alphabetical order. Alec is not here. Alejandra.
Yes.
Isaac.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Jesse.
Yes.
Manju.
Yes.
Marsha.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were thinking about it over there.
I was just trying to find mute, unmute.
Mike.
Yes.
Muffin.
Yes.
Samuel.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Did I miss anyone? Okay, we have a unanimous vote. We will consider ourselves extended for up to 6 months. It doesn't mean we have to go that far. We'll gauge it as we go. I appreciate that. We're down.
No, Xavier, obviously this is a proposal you'll then be presenting to the city and the county and the school board to approve, correct?
Oh, most definitely. This is just
You
step
said
one.
consider ourselves extended, but they have to say yes, right?
Yeah. I
And
should
when
have
will
said that.
when will be your opportunity to put this before them so we can get that approval?
We will send out an email to all three bodies, let them know that we've made this decision and seek further instructions. We can do that as early as tomorrow, I assume. Dwayne will help me out on that. Help us out on that. Thank you. Yep, that's step one. I'm sorry. I'm taking step one, saying I've arrived.
I'm
I've
just
always been a forward thinker, Mike. Forgive me.
I'm just noticing too that the proposal, it says the local governing bodies to implement it, just lists city council. So would it be appropriate if we're engaging all three that would be reflected as well then?
Well, from an operational standpoint, the city takes on the
Sure.
role of how we live in the city, but we are
Mhm.
accountable to all three. So it really would be the city that kind of
Okay,
would have to say no if that were the case.
got you.
Any other questions?
I also want to highlight part of the bylaws. It says, however, if at the end of the 24 months, the task force has not fully completed its work, the task force may by 2/3 vote of the membership add 6 months to its period of work. So I don't know if it needs further approval, but I suspect you just have to advise the council of the extension.
Right, and that's pretty much what I was saying. We're not going to wait until we're at the end and say, "Hey, we need more." We're going to make sure they understand our intentions to keep working and move forward. I just think it's poor planning to wait until the end.
And I just wanted to acknowledge my error when I was referring to that April 28th, 2023 date. I said it was our 18-month mark, and it's actually, Dr. Campbell clarified, it's our 24-month mark. So 6 additional months would bring us to 30 months together, at which point we're all basically married.
Yeah, there's nothing but love on this Zoom screen. Nothing but
Yes,
love.
what is time? Time is a construct.
It is. It is. It is. And so we're at the end of our time. We are at announcements. I know I would like to bring up the work at Hillside High School. This will be their second time presenting State of Urgency, a play about gun violence, and acknowledge that the public schools and the sheriff's office has teamed up with the high school theater department to make sure that all the students that come to see the matinees 15th, 16th, and 17th of this month will be able to come free of charge, as well as the transportation. So normally when that happens, when Hillside and other schools do matinees for students, there's like a $5 fee for students that they have to pay. And so between the sheriff's office and the public schools, they are taking that off the plates of those teachers to make sure that our entire young community gets a chance to think about these things. It is a play that was crafted by former director Wendell Tabb's discussions with youth about how they see gun violence in this community. And so it's very much a youth-oriented project. And of course, the public is welcome to attend on the 17th, 18th, 19th, that weekend. I no longer work at Hillside. I'm just making an announcement. I gained nothing from that. But those are my peeps. Full disclosure, I love that program and love the students that give their all in that. So just want to acknowledge that there's the collaboration behind that play. And I know that Marsha had an announcement. I see Manju's hand as well.
Go ahead, Manju.
I just wanted to share with the public that City Council and the county commissioners are developing their budgets for the coming year, that already it's a great time to be sharing with council and county commissioners what you believe in, what you care about regarding safety and wellness. And from the bottom of my heart and with the folks that I'm organizing with in community, we're really hoping to see full funding of the community safety department's incredible work. We've really, in our roundtable, gotten to see firsthand the phenomenal work that HEART is doing in its several pilots, and would love to see that rolled out citywide 24 hours so that every Durham resident can access those wonderful things. And even if our even if our task force doesn't make a formal recommendation, members of the public and all of us here are more than welcome to reach out and encourage that into being.
Beautiful, thank you. I just want to turn it over to Muffin. She is leading us in a really, I think, important and very heartfelt event that's coming up soon. Muffin?
Hello, everyone. So pretty much, I think all of us signed on to the letter that we sent to, our elected officials around solitary confinement at the jail. And it's been a little over 30 days, and there hasn't been a response good enough to say, oh, we don't need to do this. So what we'll be doing on February the 13th is we'll have a Zoom link with which Marsha will put in the chat. But we will be doing a letter writing campaign to the folks who are currently incarcerated in the Durham County Detention Center. And we will just let them know that what we're doing out here is still trying to fight for them to not be in solitary confinement, for them not to be incarcerated. So they'll know exactly what's going on, because we're pretty sure that they're not getting the information on the inside, that people are still fighting for them on the outside. So everyone is welcome to join us. It'll be from 6 to 7 on February the 13th.
And the link is in the chat. Thanks, Muffin. And we expect DA DeBerry to join us. We really are looking to her for leadership on this. She really holds a lot of the power on this and is our ally. And so we look forward to also hearing what she has to say in her on next steps and how we can make, really find relief for our brothers and sisters who are now over 1,040 days being held in their cells alone for 21 to 23 hours a day. Nobody can argue that that is not harmful. And
Muffin, we'll be helping folk with the details of like how to write the postcards and how to mail them themselves, or how we can collect them and get them sent off for them, right? They just come to the Zoom and they write the notes to the detainees that they have the names for, and then we take it from there.
Yes, they'll be writing the letters or postcards, whichever they choose, to the incarcerated individuals. And then we'll figure out a way to either collect them or have them send them themselves.
And we do have the full list and also with the length of stay. So I think that we'll probably start with folks who have been there, I think the longest at this point is 1,700 and some days. So pre-COVID, they have been in their cells alone. I mean, I don't know, it just breaks my heart.
Thank you for allowing us time to give those announcements for all this important work that's going on. Samuel did have to leave early. He had to go to his Black Student Union meeting at his school, math and science. But he did put a quote in the chat about the state of urgency play. He said he saw the showing last year. He encourages everyone to attend. As a young person, he believes it's important that we all listen to youth, and because the youth are the next generation. So just want to make sure he got that said out loud. And Marcia, turn it over to you for closing.
Would just love if anybody would like to put in the chat, just what are you leaving today? We're early, dinner's sooner. And if you'd just like to throw in the chat, what are you leaving with today as we begin our work and service until we see each other again next month?
You gonna read them out, Marcia?
I will. I just put mine in. All righty, here we go. Excitement, community, resolve, time, faith in our community, connection, creativity, hope for liberation of many kinds in many ways, gratefulness, perseverance, revolutionary love. Wow. Hear, hear. Blessings to all you revolutionary lovers. And we'll see you next month.